Hello and welcome to this wonderful interview series to mark and celebrate International Women's Day. This year I wanted to mark it with something different. I wanted to bring about conversations that could raise our awareness, not only about what's happening out there in the world, which perhaps sometimes we might feel as though we don't have much control over. But I also wanted to bring the conversation back into the confines of our own minds, homes, lives, and hearts. And in a bid to raise the awareness around the power that lies within us. So as we talk about important situations and topics and relearn how to take care of ourselves in a very simple yet profound way, we can then all band together, men and women around the world, rising up stronger to then have that ripple out into the world. And today I am so absolutely over the moon to welcome Jonathon Powers, a really good friend of mine. Jonathon, welcome.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for having me in celebration of women everywhere.
Jonathon Powers is a light body healer. He's a core practitioner, and he's developed a method of his own for transcendental awakening through an awareness of embedded patterns in the body. Is that right, Jonathon?
That's right. It's a mouthful, right? It's totally a mouthful. But the idea is basically around the idea of illuminating that which is truly stopping us from living in our potency.
Mm-hmm. And this is exactly why I'm excited for today's conversation. We have a lot on the agenda. Hopefully we can get through a lot of it. Jonathon, can you start by describing, because I know you work very closely with the archetypal patterns that we humans carry in the gorgeous life of ours. Can you start by describing to our audience what an archetype is, for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, thank you for that. So this topic is extremely large, and it can get extremely mental. And there's a tremendous amount of information available online about archetypes. But fundamentally speaking, for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to be talking about that which is unconscious to us. And when we think, as an example, one of the famous kind of psychological quandaries, I guess, out there in the world is, when a baby is born, is it a blank slate, or is that baby born with certain traits and types of personality or temperament and so on? So in terms, that's what I'm going to be talking about today is, are you the type of person that believes that babies are born as blank slates, or do they come in with a whole program ready to go, right, as far as personality traits? So when we think about archetypes, what we can say about that in terms of if you've ever been around children, you can kind of gauge that they do have different temperaments. Some children may be more prone to cry more, some may be more fussy. But what truly is quite interesting is, what is it about our psyche that determines how we respond to words like fear or love or abandonment, or even just by saying the word money? How do we naturally flow in that way? So what is this autonomic trigger, right? That and where does it come from? What inspires the growth process, and what inspires people to go forth in their lives in any direction, really? How do we respond to the circumstances of our life? So these archetypes are embedded aspects of ourselves that uh, really, truly, from what I see in the work that I do with so many people, is it's almost like a collective mental form of consciousness. It's quite interesting.
Mm.
So, in terms of like, let me think here for just a second. So, everything is archetypal in nature. That means that everything on the planet and the planet itself is archetypal, meaning that it comes from a structure. And these structures are based upon patterns. And these patterns seem to be unbreakable. So when we think about everything being archetypal, that can be a little bit overwhelming. So there's four archetypes that I work with that I feel cover the whole psyche. And yeah,
Okay, I was going to
and
say, because that's really helpful to narrow it down a little bit. Yeah, because you're right. The idea to me of this is the way it is and it cannot be changed is like a little bit like to the brain. So
uh,
yeah, continue.
yeah. So it's not that, and I love that you say that like it's into the brain, because that was me too. It's like, what do you mean I don't have control over my life? Right? Like, what do you mean? Like how could this force that's out there, how could the collective unconscious be that impacting or impactful on my daily life to influence my choices and whatnot? And
Mm.
this is a really huge subject, because right now I could break off into marketing, I could break off into so many different ways that these things influence us, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go there, right? So there's four specific archetypes that I'm going to talk about today. And they're lover, warrior, magician, and sovereign. And these four archetypes have three subcategories in each archetype. So there's 12, just like there's 12 houses of the zodiac, and so on and so forth. And my favorite archetype is the magician, because the magician archetype has the shaming message within it that says, I'm bad. And it's this I'm bad message in this part of our psyche, that deep down inside of ourselves, that we believe that we're inherently bad and there must be something inherently wrong about me, that I feel is stifling a tremendous amount of energy, that is perpetuating self-hatred, loathing, is perpetuating fear and unworthiness. And I feel like in that one archetypal house, there's so much need for empathy and compassion and love and understanding. And
This one sounds like the perfect one to be describing. It's our topic is how can we as women develop a deepened self-awareness so that we can then take back our power to band together, rise up stronger, find our voice, choose our choices,
oh
and
yeah,
the bigger picture. So yes, please tell us more.
sure. So as like we think of body shame, right? And we think of body shame, and like right now I have like this red mark on my cheek, and I'm like, oh shoot, I wish I didn't have this on my face, or like I wish that my hair was to be thicker, or I wish that like I felt more confident in my body. That's archetypal. Like that's not just solely specifically for you, by you, invented by you. That's like all across the board, right? So there's something about everyone that they don't like about themselves. And when we talk about body shame, it's like when you look at body shame from an archetypal standpoint, what is it that you really want to have happen? What is it that you really truly desire that you feel you can't have? A lot of the times for me specifically, it's just self-confidence. I just feel like if I were to actually be self-confident, then I would pay a price for that. And the price that I would pay, I'm not willing to find out because I don't want to know, because the risk is too risky. And therefore, I have my life set up in such a way where I don't take the opportunity to develop self-confidence by engaging in looking at my body image or my body shame, however, and moving through whatever resistance that is present, so that I don't run the risk of actually finding out how beautiful and how wonderful and how valuable I am. And I'm
So
using this as an example, just one more second. I'm just using this as an example because there's so much body imagery that is projected at humanity in itself, not just the female archetype, but the male as well, you know? And if we don't look a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, then we are perceived to be something other than how we actually are being in the world.
wow. And I was gonna chime in and say, well, how apt this mini segment is for today's conversation, and wondering if we could maybe just uncover how that may, I mean, I can visualize it, but just for our audience at home, in case they're not and they really would like to, how that might play out in someone's life, in a woman's life, this, you know, having this archetypal pattern. So would it be, for example, avoiding looking in the mirror, avoiding getting, you know, naked with the lights on with the partner? Would it be, you know, making sure that they've got, you know, everything perfectly down to a T in terms of their appearance? So, you know, eyebrows and eyelashes and false nails and, you know, the right,
Yeah.
you know, is that what you think it kind of, in your experience, manifests as? And
There's
so how can we begin?
there's always a joy in femininity. There's a joy of that I see in women. I've always been so, whenever I go shopping for my own clothes, I'm always like, gosh, you know, they make such way more amazing clothes for women than they do for men. And it's like, it just seems to me, and I had a family of 6 sisters and 2 brothers. And being female looked like so much fun. And so I would imagine that being able to paint your nails and do your toenails and wear really cute sandals and like wear summer dresses and flowy materials and things like that to embody that femininity, it looks like so much fun to do that. And so I want to reach out and just say it's fun to be who we are, right? And this expression, it's when it's not okay for us to be in that expression, when we feel that we cannot experience the joy of embodiment because I'm afraid I might be bad. I'm afraid I might hurt another person. I'm afraid that I won't be safe. These are the types of things that I'm talking about, because body image and body shame, for sure. It's like the example of revealing our ability to be vulnerable in, I was going to say in the eyes of our lover, but even in our own eyes, just being able to stand in front of a mirror straight away, like, you know, in our vulnerability and our nudity, and not pass judgment on ourselves, right? And not to have that, oh, like, oh, I wish these were bigger, or I wish I had, like, you know, bigger muscles, or, you know, if I,
Yeah.
it's, are we using that as a distraction, excuse me, from just saying, look at how unique and beautiful I am?
I think this is such an important piece in our conversation, and I'm so glad you just have this knack, Jonathan, of bringing
Excuse me.
exactly what is needed. And I hope that you guys watching, guys or girls and guys watching, are soaking this up, because what I'm hearing you saying, and actually this is something that I've been working with personally for a long time now, and it's kind of, it's a big one for us all. So what I'm hearing you saying, and I'm loving it, is
Oh, thank you.
women, and I've studied this actually, and I've seen it myself in the history books, that women have for centuries, longer, decorated themselves. You know, if you look back to Egyptian times, the women, and well, and the men, you know, they wore kohl eye makeup and beautiful headdresses and sort of body paint and so on. You know, goddesses in ancient times were beautifully dressed with and quite not just feminine but revealing at the same time. You know, to use that word.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm loving that there's kind of two sides to this coin, as there always is that we're not saying don't, you know, don yourself and decorate yourself and celebrate yourself and enjoy yourself. In fact, we're saying do that. And what I'm hearing, and maybe you can clarify, is that there's a shadow side to that, right? And the shadow side is doing all of that stuff to either please a certain image or meet a certain standard, or to protect our own insecurity, vulnerability, feelings of, you know, not enoughness, to make us feel as though, okay, well, I can, if I do all of this, I can go to work and feel confident. If I, you know, wear all of that, I am worthy. I am worthy of a place in this world. I am worthy of a place around that board meeting table, or, you know, in the company, etc., etc.
Yeah, this is a huge career aspect is really huge, especially when we look at the history of women in the workforce, right? And there's a tremendous amount of information that the archetypes say about that. Like, for instance, my archetypal impression of the 80s and the 90s was, you know, the archetypal love affair between CEO and secretary, and, you know, the idea of mini skirts, or, you know, like that whole concept is like, it's so funny. Or the other one is could be that you gotta dress to impress, that whole archetypal aspect. And you know, there's women and men out there that look at that industry and say, I am happy in my natural beauty. I don't feel the need to press on nails, or I don't feel the need to express that way. And, you know, in some body complexes, and is you may find that women feel more comfortable wearing suits, or they feel more comfortable dressing in a more masculine way. And what society, in my consideration, has done has shamed that, right? Because it's not the technical norm. It's not the norm. But honestly, though, and I know that I run the risk here of saying something that's going to be like really triggering, and maybe this is good that I'm willing to run this risk of
Risk it,
triggering
Jonathan.
somebody who's listening, is that, but that only exists in your mind, because what you put your attention on is truly only what's real. And the reason why I'm saying that this is such a risk is because we do have things like systemic racism, and we do have things like sexisms and all the isms of our world. But you see, I don't want to say like in the idea of bypassing. And what I mean by a bypass is to say, I'm just going to ignore it, even though my house is burning down, and I'm just going to start, you know, saying 100,000, you know, mantras that my house is going to burn down. No, you need to put the fire out, right? You need to put it out. You need to honor that, or you're going to lose your home. You get what I'm saying? But this is a little bit differently, because we, as an incredible being, like the human body, the human psyche is such an incredible mechanism. It can take in all of this information and, based upon the archetypes, create the house that you're sitting in. You get what I'm saying? Like, it creates the relationships that you have. It creates the type of money you're willing to make. It's going to allow you to, what kind of car you have, like, what fears, what excites you. Like, I hope, I know this is like really broad, but I hope this is getting clear, because what we choose to put our attention on is what we're going to get. And so if you feel that by feeling your best, you look like you're dressed up in a suit and tie, and you're like, wow, I'm this beautiful woman, I feel like I put together, I feel more comfortable in this masculine form, and you feel rejected from that, I'm sorry, the only rejection that you're getting is only from yourself. And it seems a little bit weird because you could say, well, my coworkers make comments, and it's like, yeah, but it's illuminating, it's triggering, like that shadow. It's like saying what's showing up inside of me, what arises in me shows up in the external. And so if you're feeling rejected or despondent or shut down in any way, it's because you have an archetypal limiting belief system that says, I am a woman living that does not feel comfortable in a feminine form, that is asking for something more congruent with me, and that's wrong. I'm going to do it anyway and receive the rejection of it, and then push against it, and try to change it. And never is going to work because it's not in the external, it's in the internal. You can do the same thing with the money. It's like, what is this pattern about ramping up your credit card and then paying it off at the end of the month, and then ramping up your credit card and paying it off at the end of the month? Like, this is one of those intrinsic patterns that says, I am creating a trauma and drama cycle in my life of just saying, I'm bored, or I'm looking for some level of conquer or some sort of like achievement in my life of ramping up my credit card, getting all trauma and drama about paying it off at the end of the month, and then finally creating the money to then pay it off at the end of the month. And we do these things with food, we do this with sex, we do it with makeup, we do it with exercise, we do it with spiritual growth work, we do it with so many things. And it's because we're so distracted from what I call the present moment.
So what I'm hearing is, and something that you and I both teach a lot, is, as you say, developing an ability and a practice of observing ourselves, which then leads to a deeper sense of self-awareness, which then leads to choice. That being having that, once we have, I always say that self-awareness is your biggest power tool, because once you derive and extract those useful nuggets of information about yourself, and it's not, as you say, it's not to judge, blame, or shame, or even try to manipulate or, force a round peg into a square hole. It is more so to be able to proceed with consciousness. And this is where it's at, right?
Yeah.
When I am conscious of my pattern, it can no longer have the same grip on me as it has been having. It can no longer, and this is what I want to get onto actually. Well, you've already touched on it, but it can no longer have that invisible negative, it's like an eroding sort of constant kind of erosion, isn't it, that we kind of don't know where it's coming from. So all the beautiful thing is, all of this can be in place. We can be a particular archetypal pattern, we can have this tendency, this habit, that habit, but as we continue to sort of go beneath the surface, dig deep, and come up like a bit like a miner, as we're mining for the diamonds and the gold, and we can bring it up and say, okay, put it on the table, this is what I'm working with. It's not about fixing it overnight, is it? It's just about embracing it all and being just aware. So
yeah.
Can you tell us, how do you, in your work with your clients, use the archetypes to assist somebody to make perhaps positive changes, or shift a pattern that's maybe been a bit destructive, or maybe they've been just perpetuating a really unhelpful or even painful situation in their life. How do you do that for people, and in practical terms, just in case anyone watching might want to go away and explore? And I imagine you would too. I recommend grabbing your journal and spending a few minutes just observing yourself, thinking about, contemplating, looking back at what's happened, what hasn't happened. I always say, look at your life themes. They don't go away, they keep coming back, don't they, until we recognize them. So what would you say to someone who might want to do that? Do you have any tips and tools?
So my favorite person to work on, my all-time favorite client, is myself. So I have a tremendous amount of wisdom that I've developed between working with myself and these archetypes. And it does become very useful. One of the most practical things to get is that safety is the goal here. To feel safe in our body, to feel safe on this planet, to feel safe in our relationships, like the ideal safety. To know that when I'm in my pattern, meaning that when I'm triggered or I'm having an off day or whatever day, however, if you feel that I'm off center, the idea is to get back to that center, right? And so in that moment of uncenteredness, or that feeling of being off centered, or I'm having a bad day, week, month, or year, the idea is to get to the center of what the discomfort is trying to tell you. And how I figure that out and how we work this out is by realizing, what do we really truly desire? And that's such a blasé question, but it's a gateway to allowing so much wisdom and freedom to come out, to say, I really want peacefulness in my life. Okay, well, what keeps you from peacefulness? My 40-hour week plus job that makes me crazy, and I have a boss I don't like. And it's like, okay, so if you really had that 40-hour plus week job that didn't make you crazy, and you didn't have that boss anymore, what would that have that you don't think you have already? And it's like, well, what would that give you that you don't think that I have already? Well, it would give me the peace of mind. And you can say, and what would peace of mind really give you, right? What would that peace of mind really, really give you? And the answer is safety. It's really interesting how this process works, about just asking those questions. What is it that you really want? What's keeping you from what you really want? And what would life really look like if you had what you really wanted?
Yeah. Well, safety is one of our most basic human needs, isn't it?
Well, that and connection.
Yes. It comes in those they're all in the same category.
Yeah, those two I would have to say, safety and connection. But I mean, for me, like, safety is one of those. I mean, I think about that, and I think about a little toddler, a little baby who's like going through the developmental stages of figuring out how to even sit up, and to develop that level of safety, just to find that, opportunity to sit up and actually like stabilize him or herself. That's brilliant that we can do that. And I think what I've developed as a perfectionist archetype is that I forget how much it's taken for me to sit up. Like, the simplest things in my life have taken the most, I don't even know how to even say that, like the most grandiose level of confidence to even do it. And how did I get to be at my current age now with being hypercritical. Do you know what I mean?
You've done pretty well, my darling.
I would have to say, but I mean, to those of us who are maybe listening to this, it's like, what is the cost of that? Like, what has the cost of being hypercritical cost us when we're like our life is miraculous? Like the basic fact that we even woke up today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like we get so
on my social media this weekend, yes, for sure. Because we do get pulled off center quite easily, and we get, like you say, just caught up with the external. So what I'm hearing you say, just to come back to that, that sort of potential exercise that we can do, is, and this is a tool that I use a lot, and I know that Jonathon and I have worked together quite closely for the past 8 months as we've been taking ourselves through further personal and spiritual and professional development, because it never ever ends, does it, Jonathon? So it's this tool of powerful questions, and oftentimes it's not comfortable to take ourselves through that process, but it doesn't have to be, like you say, Jonathon, something too far out there. It can be very simple questions, just to bring it back, just to reconnect the relationship that we have with ourselves. I call it sort of unclogging the pipes, because a lot of what resides is obviously it's in the mind, but it doesn't even come to the mind because we've buried it so deeply. And I teach an exercise in my online training courses. It's actually a guided meditation where we focus in with the heart, and then we just go through the whole process of unblocking that pipe. It seems quite simplistic, but it's very powerful. So it takes courage, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And
it
takes segmenting some time, and it's not about, it's a gift. It's a gift, but it's not just a gift, it's a necessity. So self-awareness, sitting with that level of self-courage to go with them, because we don't always want to peel back the layer, do we? We don't always really want to look beneath the surface, because then we have to make the decision to either act or do something with the information that we've got, or not. And then when we don't, it's like turning our back on ourselves, isn't it? And something I've noticed a lot is that very often we kind of have quite a strong inkling as to where we could shift a little bit, and what we what we could do differently. But sometimes, until the universe gets that sledgehammer and bashes us on the head with it, it takes something like that for us to stand up and say, oh, okay, maybe it's time to look beneath the surface. So do you have any tips or tools to help with getting to know, what archetypes we might fall under? Is there a little tidbit that you can offer our audience, as they sit with their journal, as they sit with their pen and paper, as they sit, with themselves, to come back to themselves, maybe with a little bit of courage, step by step? Have you got any tidbits that you can share to help them with that process?
So in terms of archetypal testing, or getting involved, or discovering what archetypes you might have, there are online tools. I think archetypes.com, and Carolyn Mace is an incredible resource in this area. But excuse me, for me, it's a habitual pattern, and I believe that those of us who are listening to this conversation know that there's something keeping us stopped. There's something that, because we're obviously seeking something if you're listening to this conversation, you're seeking big time, right? Because this is not surface conversation. This is deep stuff. And if you're listening to this, it's because you are a seeker. And what I could that you're seeking to change is a habitual pattern that you know yourself is either going to prove to you that you're unlovable, that you'll never truly get what you want because you don't deserve it, or deep down inside you're really bad. Now, these are the shadow aspects of the archetypes. And if you really are willing to, in your journal, discover the messages around the betrayals in your life, if you're willing to look at and get really close and nudge, really snuggle up with some of those betrayals in your life, they have a lot to tell you. Based upon, I don't have like an assessment that I could give you in this moment that I could say, just go to my website and do the archetypal assessment. Hopefully one day, yes, but not today. However, I would think that that's the number one tool, is to really look at it, the wounding, the betrayals of your life. And I mean, this is so interesting because this is how the psyche works. Like, the human shadow isn't just about the things that you're not willing to do. It's the things that you're also willing to do. Because what makes it a shadow is that even though you're doing everything in your life to stop yourself from performing that way or being that way, you're doing it anyway. Even though you're trying to stop it from happening, it's still happening anyway. And so might it be that with a little bit of courage and some empathy for self and an opportunity to get really clear about the patterns in your life, did your mom act a certain way? Did your dad? It could be something like, in terms of shaming and wounding, like, when was the first time you were really shamed? Did you accidentally hurt somebody and got punished for it and it was an accident, and therefore now you're totally afraid to be celebrated because you're afraid someone's going to get hurt? Like, this is the stuff that I'm talking about. Like, this is like the stuff that I'm like, and you could get, and it gets kind of deeper, like, especially around sexual shame and sexual wounding, it goes a little bit deeper, but it's like, within that, over and over and over and over with every client and every time I process myself, all I really want to know is that I'm safe. Every single time.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you could just take a moment and really indulge in yourself, indulge in your story, indulge in your life history, and say, what is really keeping me? What is really keeping me from having what it is that I truly desire?
When you spoke the words, I am safe, I just wanted to bring it back because it's a message I really want to strengthen and send out, with bows and roses and glitter and rainbows to all our women and men who might be watching today, because I strongly believe from that place of centeredness, because that's what it is, isn't it? Feeling safe means that we are, we've gathered ourselves back in to the source, whatever that might mean to anybody. And I also believe that the tidbits that you offered, the processes are, for me, above and beyond, more useful than any questionnaire anybody could fill out. And that is because we are actively engaging in the process ourselves. Anybody can say, you're this type and you're that type. And you may not know really what to do with it. And this is what I teach in, and I write about this in my book. It's, I've been teaching this method for a long time, and it's not pretty when you're engaging in it. It's bowing down gracefully, because, processing our own stuff, our own wounds, our own stories, our own emotions is never pretty, it's never easy. And often we, as I said before, we dance around the periphery of it, or we turn a blind eye, or we sort of press mute or pause because we either don't have time, or it's too uncomfortable, or we just do not want to relive a past pain or trauma. But when we can set the tone and give ourselves permission, as you've been describing just now, Jonathan, to go there, the beauty that will be available to us, the liberation, the freedom, as I said, the level of self-awareness, you just can't get that by somebody giving you the scores to your the questionnaire you've taken, or even somebody analyzing you and telling you, it's got to actually, for me, in my experience with my personal journey and with my clients, it's got to come from within. And that there, in those moments where we get that, oh, I see that, I get that, I feel that, it makes sense now. That is true transformation. That is true empowerment. That is true coming back to ourselves. So I encourage us all, if it's new to you and you're watching this and this process is new to you, we know you can do it, don't we, Jonathan? Like, as you said, if anybody's on this, watching this right now, it really truly is their time of awakening. Because as you said, this is not day-to-day stuff, is it?
No. This is looking at life through, how can I truly how can I develop the responsibility to respond to life instead of being the effect of it?
And that's beautiful.
How can I be the magician of my own life?
And as I said, that's beautiful because it brings it right back full circle as to why I'm even doing this interview series in aid of International Women's Day, aimed at people, everyday people like you and me, going about daily life, trying to figure out how to live a better life, how to create a better inner experience, how to feel better, how to have better relationships, whatever it might be, more fulfillment, more meaning. Because one of the first steps is taking responsibility, isn't it? Or ownership, or whichever word you prefer to use. And that we can absolutely do when we are armed with those powerful pieces of knowing and information and awareness. So as we come to a close today, I just want to say it may not be easy, but it will always be worth it, right, Jonathan? Have you got any final words for our beautiful women around the world, and maybe even the men or their men or whoever, whatever out there who's watching? What from your heart would you like to share as we bring this conversation to a close today?
There is no other connection greater than the connection to yourself. And you are so seen and so held and supported. And when that connection is valued higher than any other form of connection, I believe that we will never want again.
Thank you.
You are worth it. We are totally, totally worth that level of satisfaction, for sure.
That's really beautiful. Because I'm imagining, just like it was the same for me years ago, that the idea of allocating, 10, 20, 30 minutes out of a very busy day, very busy schedule with probably many responsibilities to sit with a pen and paper, or in meditation, or in contemplation, or allow ourselves, a hot bubble bath while we, process our past pains, whatever it might be, can seem a little bit out of reach, a little bit indulgent, self-indulgent. But as you said, this is not indulgence, it's actually necessity. so that we can continue to navigate this life as the best possible versions of ourselves in any given moment, not because we want to adhere to an outside ideal, but because it just freaking feels better, right?
It's true. It's very true. And that's it. It's like, personally, that's what I'm currently working on. And all of my relationships and everything that I relate to has one thing in common, is it validates where I am in connection with myself.
100%.
That's it. And when I discovered that relationship, I was like, well, I want to discover every risk, every block, every trigger that is inhibiting me from having an a open, clear channel of connection with myself first, because everything of that relationship is existential, right? It extends from that.
Yeah,
So.
I'm not mocking you. I'm just giggling at the depth of this. And guys, it might sound like, you're going to have to be constantly walking around with your journal or constantly, zen down. It's really not that way. Life will always bring us, doesn't it? It always brings us little opportunities or big opportunities. It's always happening. And if we miss one opportunity, another one will come along, and you can have fun with it. And I was giggling because of the amount of sort of, vigor at which you were describing, your commitment to this process, and I relate to that, because we're on par, aren't we? We're right there, and I wish that for you as well, watching at home today, because a lot of times we misconstrue it as a weakness, don't we? If we're kind of going into the stuff, into the gunk, it's vulnerable and it's weak, but it's totally the opposite. It's an absolute sign of personal power and self-love, and that's what I'd love to end on today, is that, as you said, you are enough, you are loved, just to repeat Jonathan's words, and you can absolutely do this, and you can make a start today, and it doesn't have to be a huge step. I often say, if you can't leap, and even if you can't step, just take a shuffle, because when we shuffle, we actually don't have to lift our foot off the ground. So we're still supported, we're still, cocooned and enmeshed in the security and the safety, as you said, of what feels doable. So today I encourage you to do what feels doable. And please do feel free to get in touch with either of us. I'll be posting the links of how you can do that. If you feel like having a chat with Jonathan, if you've got any questions for Jonathan, I'm just taking the liberty. I'm sure that's okay, right, Jonathan?
Yes, thank you so much.
So if you feel drawn to ask him any questions or anything, or the same with me, our doors are always open. If this is new to you, if you've been chugging away at this for a while, it's always nice to have a beautiful, like-minded support network around you. If you're not already part of the Upgrade community, please feel very free to knock on the door, and we'll welcome you with open arms. Wherever you are in the world, whatever it is you're going through or experiencing, and however it is you'll be celebrating International Women's Day 2019, I'm sending you so much love. Jonathan, any last words?
Well, thank you, Maria, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And to everyone out there listening, just keep on loving yourselves. For sure.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for what you are and who you are and what you do, and for taking the time today to share with us. Until next time, guys. Mwah.